Trump secret plane switch, Colombia quake death toll, and Assad sentenced to death, North Korea missile launch. Greetings, humanity! Let's grok the news. We cover the world's headlines, but first, a deep dive into the most important story in the world today. Dateline, Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump confirmed that the Secret Service and U.S. military insisted he leave the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey last month by secretly switching aircraft after intelligence pointed to a credible Iranian missile threat aimed at Air Force One. Trump told reporters the decision was not his own, but came from security professionals who assessed the risk as serious enough to require an elaborate decoy operation. According to multiple officials familiar with the plan, Trump boarded the older blue and white Air Force One in full view of cameras and the traveling press corps. Moments later, he exited the aircraft unseen, climbed into an airport catering truck, and was driven to a nearby military C-32 jet that then flew him to Britain. The original Air Force One continued on its scheduled route, with journalists and most White House staff still aboard, effectively serving as a flying decoy, while window shades were ordered closed during takeoff. If you will forgive this observer a personal aside, out on social media the other day, he saw some very liberal posters complaining about the window shades being closed. Would that stop a missile? Well, it might deter a sniper's bullet. And once again, this observer observes that it is good that the journalists had a use. Trump later rejoined the press pool after landing in the United Kingdom and completed the final leg of the journey on the newer aircraft donated by Qatar. The entire switch was arranged within hours after intelligence indicated Iran and its proxies had obtained details of the president's itinerary and were prepared to fire on the presidential jet. This observer would love to know how they got that information. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane were among the small group briefed on the threat and the countermeasures. The revelation, first detailed by the Washington Post and corroborated by the New York Times, CBS News, and Reuters, has drawn fresh attention to the personal stakes of the ongoing U.S. Iran conflict that began in February. Trump has repeatedly said Iran has tried to target him before and that American forces struck first. Officials stress the Secret Service acted on credible, time-sensitive intelligence rather than routine caution. The NATO summit itself marked Trump's first major overseas trip of his second term and the debut international flight of the newer Air Force One airframe. Security teams had already been monitoring Iranian activity near Turkey's borders when the specific threat assessment forced the last-minute change. No shots were fired, and no aircraft was hit, but the episode underscores how the war continues to shape presidential travel and force extraordinary protective measures even in Allied territory. White House officials have declined to release the full intelligence underlying the threat, citing sources and methods. Trump himself has publicly credited the Secret Service and the military for the call, saying he follows their guidance on personal security. The catering truck transfer has already become the subject of late-night television sketches, as perhaps it should. Yet the underlying reality remains a high-stakes demonstration of Iranian intent and American countermeasures. This is the first time in recent memory that a sitting U.S. president has been removed from Air Force One mid-operation and flown on a secondary military aircraft because of an active foreign assassination or shoot-down plot. Officials familiar with the planning say the operation succeeded precisely because the press and the staff remained unaware until after the fact, preserving the decoy's effectiveness. As the Iran conflict stretches into its sixth month, the episode serves as a concrete reminder that the threat to the president is not abstract. Iranian officials have not publicly confirmed or denied the alleged plot. American commanders continue to enforce a blockade of Iranian ports and respond to related attacks by Iranian-aligned groups in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Oman. More on that later. The story continues to develop as more details of the July operation surface. For now, the confirmed facts show a president, a security apparatus, and an adversary locked in a contest that reaches directly onto the tarmac of a NATO capital. This observer would just also like to say, thank God. Thank God for the Secret Service and the U.S. military and for our president. I'm Robert Gardner, using GROK each weekday to truthfully summarize the news. And you get my opinions with it. You know that. And you know which are my opinions and which are the facts that I am presenting. Unlike many newscasts, we review a roundup of the most critical reports in the world right after this. M.S. Gardner, my brilliant wife, is author of Wolf's Bane, a dark, serious, modern take on an old fairy tale. It's a page-turning Southern Gothic story for adults. Wolf's Bane, available now at thecuriousauthor.com or amazon.com. Now we grok the news with headlines from around the world. Dateline Pereira, Colombia. Rescue crews in western Colombia are still digging through rubble 2 days after a magnitude 7.4 earthquake killed at least 254 people and left more than 2,600 injured. The quake struck the coffee-growing heartland, flattening buildings in Cali and Pereira. Officials say thousands remain missing as the critical search window narrows. Dateline Damascus. A Syrian court has sentenced former President Bashar al-Assad to death in absentia for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The court also condemned his brother Maher and several top officials. Assad remains in exile in Russia, while one cousin is facing judgment in prison. Dateline Seoul, South Korea. North Korea fired a ballistic missile, another one, this one more than 700 kilometers into the East Sea, and this is the second launch in 6 days. The test comes just before major U.S.-South Korea military drills. American and South Korean forces say the missile posed no immediate threat to allies. Dateline Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Yemen's government reports that Houthi rebels killed at least 6 people in a double-tap missile strike on a cargo ship. 4 crew members and 2 rescuers died. The attack is the first confirmed fatal Houthi shipping strike since the wider Iran war began in February. This observer thinks it is high time to consider ending the career of the Houthis, as well as Hamas, as well as Hezbollah, and any other evil Iranian proxy. Dateline the Gulf of Oman. The U.S. Navy fired Hellfire missiles from a helicopter and disabled a cargo ship that ignored warnings while trying to reach an Iranian port. The action enforces the ongoing blockade of Iranian ports. Officials say the vessel's crew failed to comply with repeated radio challenges. Fool around, find out. Dateline Kinshasa, Congo. Ebola deaths in the Democratic Republic of Congo have now surpassed 2,000. This is the fastest spreading outbreak on record. More than 4,300 cases of the Bundibugyo strain have been confirmed. The World Health Organization has declared a public health emergency of international concern. Please permit this observer a couple of asides. The other day, I watched a video taken from a train passing through some area of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and on either side of the tracks, nothing but trash and filth and debris and people living in it in the most depraved conditions. Seriously, mile after mile of filth piled on, trash piled on filth. The people there are at war. They have never not known war in that region. The people there resist modern medicine, preferring the ministrations of witch doctors. The terrain is rough. The government utterly corrupt. The millions of dollars in Western aid that have been sent are not reaching the aid workers who have walked off the job because they haven't been paid by the corrupt government. What can you do? other than let the disease burn itself out? Dateline, Madison, Wisconsin. Moderate Democrat David Crowley has narrowly defeated progressive, that is to say, communist, State Representative Francesca Hong in the Wisconsin Democratic primary for governor. Crowley will face Republican U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany in November. The race tested the strength of the Democrat Party's left wing. All too strong, both in this observer's opinion and that of most Wisconsin Democrats. Dateline, St. Paul, Minnesota. Progressive, once again, communist Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan has won the Democratic Senate primary, while Republican House Speaker Lisa DeMuth defeated Trump-backed Mike Lindell for the gubernatorial nomination. The results highlight sharp intra-party divisions ahead of the midterm elections. In both cases there in Minnesota, the establishment candidate won both the Democrat and the Republican primaries. Dateline, the Arctic Ocean. Canadian and American forces continue shadowing two Chinese Shulong icebreakers operating off of Alaska. Officials expressed concern that the research vessels may collect undersea data useful for submarine operations. Well, of course that's what they're there for. Excuse this observer, please. The monitoring reflects the growing great power competition in the high north, and in this observer's opinion is just more evidence that America needs control of Greenland. There's a big difference. America needs control of Greenland for the sake of Western civilization. Dateline, Washington, D.C. Former U.S. Marine Robert Gilman has been released from a Russian prison after more than 4 years on disputed charges. He has returned to the United States. The Russians didn't even ask for a prisoner exchange. American officials described the detention as wrongful and abusive throughout the ordeal, but many people are taking heart that Putin has released this Marine. Maybe it's a hint of things to come. Dateline, Bali, Indonesia. Rescuers evacuated 172 people from a burning ferry in rough seas between Bali and Lombok. 1 passenger died. Indonesian authorities continue searching the area after the overnight fire forced the vessel's abandonment. Dateline, Zaporizhia, Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Russia used North Korean ballistic missiles in a deadly attack that killed at least 7 people. The claim adds to evidence of Pyongyang's direct military support for Moscow's war effort. Dateline, Wellington, New Zealand. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has survived another confidence vote in Parliament. The outcome keeps his government intact amid ongoing domestic political pressure. Lawmakers cast the ballots on Wednesday, local time. Dateline, Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that Moscow will respond in kind if European nations seize Russian vessels. The statement escalates tensions over Western sanctions enforcement against Russian shipping. Officials offered no further operational details. This observer believes that if the Europeans would just sit down and shut up, we could bring peace to Ukraine. Dateline, Tehran. Hardline factions inside Iran are openly demanding the resignation of President Masoud Pezeshkian over the direction of the war with the United States. The internal clash has intensified during Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's reported absence from public view. As a matter of fact, Khamenei has not been seen since the initial bombing in February. And as for Pezeshkian, he has, it is said, more than 28 times offered his resignation and not been allowed to resign. And it's clear that Pezeshkian is not in charge of the war. Things are not looking good inside Iran. The pressure is working. Dateline, the United Nations. The UN says that extreme heat periods are becoming more frequent, more intense, and longer-lasting worldwide. The warnings coincide with the record temperatures and wildfire risks already affecting large parts of Europe and North America this summer. This observer would caution other observers to remember that the United Nations says this sort of thing all the time, and that we are in the midst of a record-breaking El Nino event in the Pacific Ocean. Folks, this isn't climate. This is weather. Dateline Kabul, Afghanistan. UNESCO reports that 2.4 million Afghan girls remain barred from secondary education under the Taliban ban. The agency calls the restriction a grave violation of fundamental rights, here 5 years after the group's return to power, following the Biden administration's disastrous and humiliating retreat. Dateline Mumbai, India. BRICS nations are advancing talks on linking their national fast payment systems. The discussions aim to reduce dependence on Western financial networks, and frankly, who can blame them? Officials say technical working groups will meet again in the coming weeks. Dateline Reykjavik, Iceland. A total solar eclipse crossed Greenland, Iceland, and northern Spain on Wednesday, the first such event visible from mainland Europe since 1999. Totality lasted up to 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Millions across Europe and parts of North America saw a partial eclipse. And this observer does not partially but completely thanks you for listening. Please join me tomorrow to once again GROK the News. I'm Robert Gardner. Godspeed and God bless.